Good afternoon and welcome. Well, it's Saturday and it's 4 o'clock, so it must be the senior moment. This is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and this Saturday we have someone with us you all may not have expected to hear. This is Chris Moore, and he owns Adapt Prosthetics here in Coeur d'Alene, and he's also a corpsman.
I was a Navy corpsman.
Navy corpsman. And he is a very, very interesting person when it comes to prosthetics and that sort of thing. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about what you all do over there. I know I took a tour of your facility a couple of years ago, and it just totally amazed me what they're coming out with nowadays. And now you're telling me that they're coming out with all kinds of things with computer chips in them and stuff. So
we're kind of the Department of Arts and Crafts of the medical field. So we like to make things. And so when people have a need for a missing limb or even a limb that they have that doesn't function, we build things from very little to very complicated to keep people moving on 2 feet.
And everything is very customized. I saw you make molds and...
We do. We have most people are unique, and so one size fits none kind of out of the box type stuff isn't always appropriate. Although we will use off the shelf stuff when we can because it keeps the cost down for the patient and their insurance companies. But a lot of times it's custom is the way to restore function, and so we'll build anything from as simple as a foot orthotic, just an arch bed that goes in a shoe, to spinal bracing and fracture management, to missing limbs and computer-controlled prosthetic devices, and all the way through that.
And you say computer-controlled. People are thinking, the bionic man or something like that. But that's pretty much where you are now, right?
Pretty much. For lower extremity prosthetics, for the most part, the computer-controlled stuff is passive in that the computer watches what you're up to, and it resists certain motion. So in the concept of, say, a prosthetic knee, the prosthetic knee has a hydraulic system that has sensors, and so that knee knows when you're on your heel or when you're on your toe. It knows when the knee's bent or straight, and if it's bending or straightening. It knows if you've been naughty or nice, and it makes adjustments to the hydraulic ports to speed up or slow down the movement of the knee to do things.
So it almost thinks.
It does, and we essentially program it or teach it to respond to certain things differently based on the user, the uniqueness of the user and their walking patterns. And so those systems are evolving, and they're getting better and better, which is a lot of fun.
And you had told me that a lot of the technologies that you have nowadays came through NASA and the military, correct?
Well, a lot, for sure, the wars, as unfortunate as they are, have driven the demand, the public demand, and the interest for development of modern and more advanced technology. The drive for the VA system to improve lately over the last few years has been pushed pretty hard, and things have improved quite a bit. And there's been a decent amount of government support for development of new projects, which have turned into commercialized devices for everybody, which has been fantastic. NASA, I don't know if they're doing things right now or not, but historically, engineers that have not had tasks to do have been farmed out. And so we've seen certain systems that have kind of been almost like a hobby, like a side project for these guys to keep them doing something. And they come up with new ideas, and because they're not classically trained in prosthetic and orthotic devices, sometimes that fresh approach drives us off in a new direction, which improves the field overall.
It's like out of the box thinking,
right,
so to speak.
Right. If you didn't know what a hamburger was and someone said make a hamburger, maybe you'd make the best hamburger ever.
Right, exactly.
So.
And you have showed me how the whole leg responds, and you've made ones that you can put on yourself.
Sure. Yep. So right. So I've made able sockets is what we've come to call them, but they're essentially prosthetic legs for people who are not amputees. And the way that came about was I'm not an amputee, and I had a patient remind me that I was not an amputee when I was trying to help him. Essentially, we were in a physical therapy appointment working on stairs, and stairs are scary for amputees, generally speaking, because it's a long way to fall. And if you don't trust the prosthetic knee that you're walking on, that is disturbing to go down the stairs. And so I said, you can do it. You're going to do great. Really, you're going to do great. And he said, that's easy for you to say. You're not an amputee. And I said, you're right. But I know you can do it because the componentry you're on is fantastic, and you are one of the strongest people I've ever met. And that didn't really encourage him very much. And so I went back to the lab. I said, well, okay, so what are we doing? When's your next therapy appointment? I have a couple ideas. And he said, tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. And I went, 7 a.m. Well, that's hard for me, but I'll see you guys tomorrow at 7 a.m. And I ran back to the lab, and I built the first one of these through the course of the day, essentially cast myself and built it. And these systems are, for lack of a better description over the radio, essentially a chicken wing type socket, in that my foot and knee are bent up behind me, and I'm sitting in a prosthetic socket like an amputee, but my foot's pulled outside through the bottom of the
You're like
socket
on your
and
knee.
bent. Well, right, but I'm not actually on the knee per se, but I'm bent that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the knee unit and the foot are attached to the bottom. So I built that through the course of the day, and the next day I walked into the physical therapy appointment on a prosthetic knee, the same system that he was on. And I walked up the stairs and turned around and walked down the stairs, and he went, well, if you can do it. And then he did, because he believed in it. And so there's something to see one, do one, teach one techniques versus the, you sure, I know you can do it. It's fine.
And you've done for a double.
I have.
Because you were saying the weight distribution on the tissues is totally different.
Absolutely. And yeah, so I did that one, that was a right leg. I did that for, I don't know, a couple of years. And through the course of time, I grew to where I didn't fit that socket anymore. So maybe the Krispy Kremes or whatever it was. But the leg just didn't fit as well, and it was especially uncomfortable for me. And one more learning lesson about wearing prosthetics, and that it was uncomfortable for me, and it gives you some insight. Not a ton of insight, because you can take your leg. I can take my leg off and walk around just fine. And whereas the amputees, when the socket doesn't fit there.
But it was a learning moment, because those patients of yours who have weight change differences or things like that, now what fit them a year ago and was comfortable may not now.
Right. Which I certainly had seen that before and knew that. But it's always interesting to see how I worked through it. Just like a lot of my patients, it's like, it's fine, I'll be all right. And, wow, I'm kind of sore, but worked through it, and finally I got to the point where I was like, I just need a new one. So for years my friends had been telling me, you need to make you need to make another one for Walk On 2, and I had always said, well, beyond the look what I can do type mentality of it, I didn't see a benefit in having two of these, having a left and a right socket and trying to walk around on two. But I thought, well, here's the chance, because I have the right one doesn't really fit all that well, but if I can still walk around in it, so I'll make a left one, and then I can learn on two, and then I can phase the right one out once I've kind of look what I can do kind of a thing. And what I found was that the right socket felt one way when I just wore the right, and the left socket felt one way when I wore just the left. But when I put both of them on, they both felt completely different. And that surprised me, because I hadn't ever really thought about it. But your posture is different when you're on two prosthetics than when you're on one. And the posture you keep changes the fit. And so that was something I hadn't learned until I learned to walk on two. And walking on two is dramatically different than walking on one, of course. And when I was learning to walk downstairs on two above-knee prostheses, that was, it drew a lot of attention, because I would do it outside, because we had a nice long stairwell. And I thought I was going to cause a car accident the first day we were working on that. Here I am at the top of these giant concrete stairs. There's nice long downhill, and I'm up there, and of course both my feet are buckled up behind me, so you can see my feet sticking out the back of these legs, and then you can see the prostheses because they're not covered, and there's this crazy guy on stilts with bending knee joints at the top of the stairs, right? And there's a Cintas truck coming around, the uniform guys, right? And they're driving around, and all of a sudden they must have got a look at what I was up to, and they like screeched to a halt and had this oh, this will be good.
Oh,
Look
we
on
got to
their
watch
face.
this
Yeah,
YouTube kind of
as I
moment.
kind of staggered down the stairs. But the yeah, so I've made two and learned to walk on two, and since that time, I've kind of put away the second one, and I just use one at a time. And I'll put therapists and doctors and family members and anyone else that pipes off about how easy or hard using a prosthesis is. I'll put them in it and say, well, it's different than you. It's always different.
That's a great learning tool, especially when you're working with therapists who are also working with those patients who have them. They get an appreciation
Right.
for what their patients are going through and their families.
Well,
You
and you
know?
learn new strategies too, because there's a limit to, well, if you say if you'd had cancer, and how your experience was as having cancer is different than someone else's cancer. So there's the empathy and the things you learn are unique to you, and they're unique to them. But it does give you a little bit of common ground. And so the way these sockets are set up, they induce some mechanical disadvantage to the person in them, mostly because you're bending your foot so far back that essentially makes your hip very tight. And so you have a lot of the same mechanical limitations that an amputee would have because of the way we're binding your muscles up. But for therapists, it's interesting because most physical therapy programs do not offer a lot of prosthetic and orthotic training, so they don't have a ton, and so they learn it on their own, independently, and depending on how observant they are, depends on how much, and also how hungry they are. If therapists that are really into prosthetics can go on to additional training, and they can. There's a ton of stuff out there, but as far as our academic background, it's limited. And so when we put them in these things, it usually opens their eyes a little bit to some of the things that don't translate from the textbooks and the internet searches to the gait lab and the physical therapy gym.
Have you done a lot of that here locally with a lot of the?
I've put a couple therapists in ours. The Adapt's fairly new. We're coming up on our 2nd year anniversary here, just a little bit. So we're fairly new, and so I don't have a huge stockpile of different socket sizes. Where when I worked before, I had a number of sizes, and so generally I had one built already that would fit just about anybody. So I've had a few therapists that have been brave enough to venture down the way in it, but not too many just yet.
Yeah, I remember putting it on. What was it, about a year ago, and it was an awakening feeling. It's like, oh my goodness, this isn't as easy as
Right.
someone who's very proficient in it
Sure.
appears to be.
No, yeah, and I'm, I can even on two, I can go up and down stairs and things, and it's very difficult. But I do not compare to any of my patients. My patients can do things on their prostheses I have no business trying to do even, and that's really neat to see some of the things that my patients can do that, I'm like, well, I have both my feet and I can strap this thing on, and I can't do that. And I don't know that I could spend enough time on one of these to ever be able to do. I have some kids that are amputees that just boggle my mind, the things they can do and are willing to do. And it's without question that they're not limited by their prosthetics so much as they're limited, the prosthetic in kids' cases, the prosthetics are usually the limitation, but the mechanics are pretty good. In adults, generally our limitations are
Self-imposed.
More above the neck, or in some cases it's the prosthesis fault. So if I'm not doing my job appropriately, then there's certainly some blame to be spread around. But
I know that was one of the things that hit me when I walked through your lab, was looking at all the ones that were in process and noticing how many of them were children's size.
Yeah.
That was a big, oh my gosh, kind of moment. I think of adults, but not, I guess, as much kids. And I would say the majority of what you had there were children's
We
size.
see a lot of kids. It's not all. How much do we see? I don't know. I probably 1 out of every 3 or 4 patients that we see is pediatric. Kids are awesome because, they're, for one, their job is to break anything I can build for them. So they're crazy, and it's really neat to watch craziness happen on something that I mixed up in a cup the day before. So when we you watch somebody run down the hall, or we go to, we'll go and watch them play at the playground and try to make adjustments based on what they're actually doing.
Uh-huh.
And you see them doing stuff, and it's like, wow, I didn't even think that leg would do that. That's pretty neat.
And that's pretty neat that you do that. I mean, you're not just in the lab, in the therapy room. Let's see you walk. Okay, that's fine. You go out with them
We do. We try and follow them.
where they're playing.
In fact,
and
right
such.
before I left this morning for work, I got a text from one of my guys, and he's heckling me because we need to go bowling, and he's having a hard time with his bowling. He walks great on his prosthesis, but he wants me to fine tune some stuff for his
He probably
bowling.
bowls better than me.
And I said, well, this afternoon I'm busy, but we need to definitely set up a time to go do that and see if we can't tweak his prosthesis so that he bowls a little better. But he was quite a bowler before he lost his foot, and he's still a better bowler than I am. But let's see if we can't tweak him.
Very cool.
And the only way to figure that out is to go to the bowling alley.
Is to watch and see
Mhm.
how it's performing.
Yeah, and see him in the state of, because we have a Wii in the office, and he could play Wii bowling, but I don't think
That's
that
totally
would do
different.
The same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Well, we're going to take a break right now and come back. And I saw some interesting things in your office where you have like designer
oh sure.
colors. So we'll
Yeah.
talk about that.
Okay.
This is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and we'll be right back with the senior moment. I want to talk about
The colors and transfers and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I remember you telling me about somebody.
Oh, the leopard print story.
Yeah.
I
So
can
we'll talk
that one.
about that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
See,
She's the coolest gal ever.
we can sit and talk and talk. You know.
Yeah. That I tell that story to everybody.
I
when
know. I
listen.
think it's pretty
think
neat.
I've probably said that. I bet in the last year I've probably told that tale 100 times. But is one of the most awesome people in the world, and so I like talking about her.
That's interesting that you talk about somebody bowling. Now I'm going to have to look around to see if I probably wouldn't even notice if somebody was like that. Okay, you ready?
Sure.
And we're back. Again, this is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and this is the senior moment. And we have Chris Moore with Adapt Prosthetics with us.
Hello.
And we were just talking about the prosthetics that you have and how you custom fit them and you custom adjust them to people's
Sure.
specific activities. But you do something really cool with them. I saw you have like designer prints. Is that it?
Well, our idea is if you have to wear some of this stuff, make it as fun as you can. And for some people, making it as fun as you can is to make it look as human as possible. And so, we'll do cosmetic covers and skins, and in some cases even the silicone restorations that look as human as the other. But a lot of folks, and with some of the more public understanding and awareness of amputees and braces as well, have found that having something bright and fun sometimes is even more fun than trying to hide things. And it was a gal actually several years ago who taught me this in spades, in that she was an above knee amputee on one side and a below knee amputee on the other side, and she walked great. She did really well as an amputee, and for years we worked on putting covers and skins and making it look human, and it looked pretty good. But when you're a bilateral amputee, particularly if you have an above knee amputation on one side, the way you walk and your strategies for moving through the community are a little different, and that is hard to hide, and so people pick up on that, and sometimes they don't always know how to treat folks historically. And so what she found was, she says, I don't like going out. People know they figure out I'm an amputee, and they don't know how to deal with me, and they treat me funny, and it's awkward, and I just don't care for it. And so for years we've been trying to hide it, and she just kind of given up. She didn't go out unless she had to, and well, she was back. When you work with these folks, you see them all the time. They're more family than they are patients. And so she was actually hanging out with us in the back of the lab, and one of the technicians was making a prosthesis for a kid. And for kids, we always try and make them as wild and as crazy as possible, because kids are crazy and they need things that match their lifestyle. and anything that's more toy and gadgetry is usually better.
It
Accepted.
doesn't look so medical.
Well, yeah, it can't look medical. So we were making, or Rick was a technician, and he was making a leopard print socket for this awesome little kid, and he was teasing her and saying, "Hey, we should totally make your next leg," because she needed a new socket. She'd outgrown one, just like kind of like how we talked about earlier, and he's like, "We should totally make this leopard print socket for you." And she's like, "Yeah, no chance, not happening." And he's like, "Oh, come on, it'd be so much fun." And I said, "Well, let's do it. Let's do it. Let us do it. And then we'll just, if you don't like it, we'll put a cover on it, and only you will know you have a leopard print. Like, it'll be like a big secret. It'll be awesome." And so she's like, "Oh, fine." So mostly she placated us. She knew she was going to get a cover, and once it's under the cover, you can't see it, and who cares if it's a leopard print or if it's black carbon fiber or whatever. So she let us do that. And the way the systems work is for the most part, modern prosthetics have alignable componentry, so you can change the angles and dial them in to match the specific user. And her system was an endoskeletal, which is like that. And during the first week, I won't generally put a cosmetic cover on those because I want to make adjustments as they learn how to use it. So she had to go without a cover on her leopard print system for that week, and we were a little nervous about that. But when she came back for her appointment, she goes, "This is awesome." She goes, "People come up to me and they're like, 'That is so cool.'" And so she had so much fun with that because it disarms people, and it gives people something else to talk about other than, don't look at it.
They can actually look at it and comment on it.
They can say, "Wow, that's really neat," instead of,
"Oh,
what happened to her?"
Yeah.
And feeling bad and awkward and all the things that she hated about the perceptions back and forth between the people. Is she felt awkward because they felt awkward, and they didn't want her to feel awkward, and it just spiraled out.
Yeah.
So the leopard print disarm people, and so she had so much fun with that she made us do her other leg in leopard, and so she's leopard print on both sides, and she wore shorts pretty much year round from then on, and always showed her legs off, and she said, "People come up to me like, 'You're my hero, it's so cool.'"
Oh, neat.
And it totally changed my perspective on making things fun for everybody. Before that, it was all about the kids. And kids, if the kid wants a Darth Vader leg, I'm going to make them a Darth Vader leg. If you want it chrome, we can do chrome. You whatever you want. I had a kid. I love this story. I had a kid say, he goes, I said, "We can do pretty much anything you want on your leg, design wise." And he goes, "Can you do a picture of God?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know what God looks like exactly." And he goes, "Oh, that's okay. We have a picture of him in our bathroom." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "But can you do a picture of him with an eagle on his shoulder?" And I said, "Well, okay." So we ended up, we kind of had to compromise a little bit, and we did he's Christian, and we did a cross with eagle's wings behind it, which was pretty simple.
Oh, nice.
Design wise, and and he liked that very well. But we do whatever we can for the kids to make it fun, and up until this particular adult, I had always been more kids oriented for that, and adults got legs that were shaped like adults, and they look like humans, and that was that. But now since that lesson, I give everyone the options of, okay, we can make it look fun, we can try to make it look human, we can do whatever you want, and so we have a ton of fun with that. From braces, we have braces with skulls and crossbones and cupids and tattoos and tie-dyes, and what else do we have? Fish.
You've expanded
we
your
have a ton of different
menu.
Yeah. So even the plastic bracing. So if there's someone out listening who's had a stroke and they're wearing just even the plastic AFO that helps keep their foot up so they don't catch their toe when they're walking. You can make them. The plastics are usually white naturally, and if you wear a lot of white socks, those blend in fairly well. But nothing says "look at me" like pink camo. And that certainly can disarm people. Grandkids tend to go crazy for wild, cool braces instead of something that looks more medical or intimidating. So we do that for all of our plastics and our certainly our prosthetics as well. But
you had mentioned that you do the braces for the legs after someone has a stroke. What other kinds of braces do you do?
We do everything pretty much from head to toe. We see. And ages from 4 months to, I think our oldest patient right now is 103.
Oh my heavens!
So we'll do like little kids since well, the SIDS epidemic, right? And we had, and then the pediatricians came out with the Back to Sleep program, which was don't let your kids sleep on their face. We're very concerned about that. They're less likely to have SIDS and if they sleep on their back. And so with kids sleeping on their back, and then just the modern era of kids being in strollers, car seats, always on their back, pretty much. We've seen a rise in what's called plagiocephaly.
What's that?
Which is essentially a flattening of the head.
The back of the head?
The back of the head. And so most kids get better, but some kids' heads don't correct on their own. And so we do cranial remolding helmets there. So if you see little kiddos running around out in town, and not running because they're tiny, they're usually in the 6 to 12 month windows when we're treating. But you see kids wearing a helmet, it's probably not that they do their own stunts. It's probably that we're working on something for that. So we do helmets. We do neck, spine braces. We do a fair amount of fracture bracing for arms and legs. And then with things like cerebral palsy, stroke, traumatic brain injury, MS, we do any number of braces for whether it be your fingers, wrists, hands, elbows. Shoulders don't brace as well, although we do shoulder orthoses. It's nice when you don't need those. And then certainly hips, knees, and feet, ankles.
Wow.
All that stuff.
So you could make a whole person there.
Pretty much. I don't do, well, with the helmet we do, but we don't do heads other than helmets.
So you sort of do.
We could make a nice statue. But yeah, so pretty much anything we make. The limitations are usually communication based. So I can only make what I can understand a patient needs. So whether it be the physician that says, look, I need X, Y, and Z, or whether the patient says, look, I need to bowl, and I can't bowl because my ankle does this. So, okay, I can make it so that your ankle doesn't do that. And if making your ankle not do that means you can bowl, then you can bowl. So as long as we have good communication, that's the first part. We can build pretty much anything once we know.
And you do it right there because I've seen you.
Yeah, we build 90% of what we do in office. Pretty much the only things we don't build in-house are things that have a patent on them. And some of the componentry is patented, which is fine by me. It's fantastic, actually. And so any of the patented systems I can't build in-house because they'd sue me.
Right.
But yeah, of all the intimate and custom stuff, we build almost everything in-house. And then, yeah. And then the second phase, the second limitation really in prosthetics and orthotics is insurance coverage. There are limits to a lot of people's insurance, and so although you may be a candidate for, the super fragilistic expialidosis system, it may be that your insurance coverage limits you to something simpler or something less cost effective. And generally, a lot of this stuff is so expensive that out of pocket is not really an option. So people just writing a check for these things is not always a comfortable situation for them. So sometimes a limitation on what they can get is based on what their insurance company says they can have, or what they can afford to pay for, or a little bit of both, depending on their coverages.
And does Medicare cover any of that?
Oh, Medicare's fantastic.
Oh, okay.
Medicare takes a beating on TV. I watch it all the time, and they talk about how horrible Medicare is. And it as an amputee or someone who needs a brace, the Medicare system can be one of the better, if not the best, insurance coverages you can have.
Really?
The issue with Medicare, and people have to watch out for, is that particularly with prosthetics and orthotics, and I say particularly because some of the other parts of your Medicare coverage is not my scope, so I don't know. A lot of our listeners probably know a lot more about some of their drug plans and things and their physician coverage and whatnot through Medicare than I do. But when you talk about prosthetics and orthotics, Medicare is going to cover 80%. So if I build you a $50,000 prosthesis, Medicare is going to cover 80%. So that's still a pretty significant cost out of pocket. So it's, as an amputee or a brace user, a secondary insurance that would fill in the 20% that Medicare doesn't cover is fantastic. But Medicare is neat in that they're not really profit driven. So if I can justify that you need a given device, you can have it. Whereas with private insurances, sometimes things have to go through review and it
get pre-authorized and all that.
Pre-authorizations, and it can be interesting in that sometimes it doesn't always seem that it's patient need so much as patient cost that drives the authorizations. And Medicare doesn't say, well, you have a cap. You already had a leg once in your lifetime or
So you can't
whatnot.
have another one.
Right, and there are still some insurance companies that will put caps on lifetime coverages and things. So so Medicare's pretty good. The thing, so generally Medicare with a secondary is awesome. There are some managed plans that essentially Medicare managed plans that sometimes are better though, and it's worth looking into. In that, unlike Medicare covers 80%, and they will always cover 80%. With the managed plans, they might cover 70 or 80 or whatever, but a lot of those have a ceiling so that you pay your percentage, and then once you've spent $10,000 that year, they cover all of it after that. And so for some patients, that's better, even if it's harder to get certain devices and whatnot. So, but in general, Medicare's fantastic, and let me
So
think
far
about
as, and I would wonder, you were mentioning about the brace for your foot because you would tend to drag it after a stroke. Are those conversations that doctors have with those patients with strokes? Or I'm wondering if someone would really know that would be available for them.
Everywhere is different, and so we see patients sometimes that have had a drop, what we call a drop foot, or has dragged their toe or rolled their ankle forever, and they didn't really know about any of that stuff. But generally, most of the rehab professionals are in this area are top notch, and would identify something like that fairly quickly.
But you would
and say,
probably have to figure out you had a problem before you went to them.
well,
to
right,
ask
but if
for
you
it.
had well, sure. If this was kind of an insidious onset, and you just like, I just every once in a while I stumble, I catch my foot, and I didn't used to do that. There's a lot of folks that we run into that way, and that have just known someone at church or whatever and said, I know a guy who makes stuff that fixes that. You should go see him. So we get some of that. But if you had a major medical event, the rehab professionals in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene are top notch, and they usually identify, oh, okay, that's an issue mechanically, and then there are a couple schools of thought as to when and how you provide services. Sometimes we like to wait a little while to see if things are going to improve before we put some monstrosity of plastic and metal on somebody, because it's always better to not need our stuff for sure. But so there are some people that slip through the cracks, but it's pretty rare unless it's something that sneaks up on them over time and maybe.
Yeah, I was
outside.
thinking, a lot of people, something hurts, so they stop walking a certain way or stop doing a certain thing, and then when they stop it, those muscles are not as strong, so now they can't do it, and they don't know that
sure.
there might be something available to help them.
Oh yeah. Well, limping is bad. So if you have some type of a compensation, and I say limping because we've been talking mostly about lower extremity, but you can have situations in your upper extremities too where a certain accommodative behavior can drive a long-term problem. And in walking, you can, if you have a bad foot on, say, your left foot and causes you trouble, it's not unusual to see it irritate your right hip by the way you're compensating. And so, so if you have an issue and it's unaddressed, then it can actually drive more issues. And so we'll see folks for that as they come in. And the nice thing about the way we're set up is we don't bill for appointments. So we do a ton of evaluations that are at no cost, and we look at people and go, yeah, if it was me, I probably wouldn't do anything, or oh yeah, you should talk to your physician, or have you had therapy for that or whatnot, and try and help with that stuff. But
Yeah, I was just thinking because you were talking about braces on different parts of the body, and yeah, if it was a traumatic event that caused the need for that, but what if it was just something that came about because you were living or getting older or modifying your physical behavior because something hurt?
Sure. Yeah, and some people, and it's not uncommon for folks to say, I'm however old I am, and I expect that I have arthritis. And a classic one would be, gosh, when I get up, it really hurts in my knee, but just on the one side, just on the inside of my knee, it hurts a lot. And I get walking, and it kind of feels better, and then I sit down, and it hurts for a little bit, but then it goes away, and then I get up and I walk, and he's, well, I'm just, I'm 65, 70 years, 80, 90, however old, and my knees
I'm
are
just
just
getting
wore
old.
out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, in those cases, if there are braces that we make that can actually change the way your knee lines up so that your arthritis doesn't bother you as much. And a classic example for folks that are listening is, if you're bow-legged, as an extreme, if you're bow-legged, the inside part of your knee sees more load than the outside because of the way you're bent. And if you're knock-kneed, it's the opposite. And so if you have a little bit of an angle there through the course of your life, you have the potential for a little more wear on those areas. And so we have braces that can actually change, not a huge, but a little bit of an angle. Somewhere between 3 and 7 degrees is typical. We will encourage the knee alignment in the sideways direction to move off of an area that's heavily worn, that's irritated from the osteoarthritis and the compartmental issues. And in those cases, we have folks that have delayed or completely avoided the need for knee replacement in a brace. And
Because
so,
now it's more in a line.
Right. We've unloaded the area that hurts a fair bit. And so generally moving that off of that point can restore function and get things going. So there's a ton of that stuff. You run into it with foot and ankle too. There's 26 bones and 33 articulations in the human foot, and changing the angle just a little bit can get you off that part that hurts. And so we see a lot of folks for arthritis, and a number of the physicians in town that do fantastic work will in terms of total knee replacements and whatnot. Well, a lot of times we'll send them to us first to try and get a brace on to either keep them on their feet so they can do a wedding, or there's some event that they can't miss, they don't want to miss, stretch it out a little bit so it's convenient for a knee, or if they're not, maybe they're not a candidate for surgery yet, they're too young, or they're too old and anesthesia is a little concerned.
Right.
We do a fair number of those things.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a break and come back and talk. I could sit and talk to you for hours. But this is Connie Clark with the Senior Moment, and we'll be right back. Yeah, you were saying about the ankle. What is it? Because mine kind of goes over. What's it called when you call it a rolling ankle, but it's pronate.
Pronate. Oh, sure. Pronation, supination, sure.
Is that something you can put a brace on and keep it from doing that?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, so, and we have a CAD system now. I don't know if you've seen that. So we do foot orthotics in an hour, custom foot orthotics in an hour while you wait.
Really?
Yeah. So.
You don't have to go stand on the thing in Walmart or nothing?
People think it's the same thing. It's kind of funny, but yeah, no, we have a digital caster that we use, and it takes a 3-dimensional cast, and the computer reads it, and then I go, and instead of doing it all by hand in plaster, I'll actually modify it on the screen, and then I have a CNC machine that will turn out a custom piece.
No, you didn't have that before.
No, it's pretty spendy. We're the only ones in North Idaho that have one, and it takes about 30 minutes total. So I do the eval, and we'll talk and sit around with the patient and come up with the ideas that we need, and then it takes about 30 minutes to build it, and we'll walk them down the hall, and they're done.
Fantastic.
Which is awesome, because in the industry right now, the standard of care for that is about 3 weeks, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
Because if your feet hurt waiting 3 weeks,
oh yeah,
I mean, there's a ton prone for more injury can happen in that time for sure. Certainly, you're not getting any better, and so this allows us to get.
Oh, neat. Yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, you ready? And we're back. Again, this is Connie Clark with Home Helpers, and we're on the Senior Moment, and we're talking with Chris Moore with Adapt Prosthetics. And during the break, we were just talking about something because he had mentioned about the rolling ankle. And I do that. And mine has, what is a slight pronate or whatever it is, where it kind of rolls inward. And I'm always having trouble finding shoes. The only ones I can really find that have something in them are specific tennis shoes. But when I wear boots or my dress shoes or something like that, it does it. And he was saying that you have something really neat, and it's not like when you walk in Walmart and put your foot on the Dr. Scholl's thing. What is it you guys have there?
Well, so we do, of course, we do everything pretty much, head to toe, like we were talking before. But one of the things that we seem to be doing a lot more and more of is foot orthotics. And so, like for overpronators, like yourself, or people who have high arches, even we're building custom footbeds that address some of the mechanical deviations and deformities that people have that limit their lifestyles. And historically, the way you did these is you did it by hand. You either took a cast, a plaster of Paris cast of the foot, or we had a foam that was, well, they call it biofoam, but
I've
it's kind
seen
of like
that. It's like in a shoebox, and you put
it's
your
like
foot in.
it's like warm snow, and or actually, I guess florists use a lot of that same foam for their when they arrange flowers. And we grab onto your foot and hold it in a position we wanted, and we push you down into it and take the shape. And then from there, you fill that shape with plaster of Paris, or the cast, you fill it with plaster of Paris, and you sculpt it by hand. You let all that set up and dry, and then you would vacuum form or laminate the materials over it, and it's kind of, and then you hand grind all of it out, and it's a fairly detailed process and
Labor intensive kind of thing.
And because it's all by hand, it's somewhat subjective to how much coffee I've had that morning. So if I've had more coffee, that insert might be a little bit thinner, and when I say thinner, like 32nd of an inch different, because my eyes are, well, I'll be 40 soon. So my eyes, they'll be as detailed as a 40-year-old can see while he's holding on to something, pressing it into a belt sander and polishing the materials. And it works pretty good, but you have about 4 hours or so in the time frame. And so what most providers, particularly providers that didn't have a lab in-house, would take the casts and they'd send them out, and someone else would build them, usually in California or who knows where, and you get them back in 3 weeks, and then they'd get to try them. In our case, we'd take those casts and we'd build them in the lab, and we'd have it in a day or 2 or 3, just because of scheduling the amount of fab time. And so about a year ago, I was getting kind of frustrated because it was taking me too long to get stuff done. And I don't like waiting for a cheeseburger in the drive-through, much less if my feet hurt. I don't want to wait for something that's going to help me. And so we put a significant investment down, and we bought into the AmFit system, which is a computer casting system that has a CNC machine and allows us to make custom footbeds in the same appointment. And so it's not like the lens crafters guys that make your glasses an hour, but it kind of is, in that we, for anyone who's ever had kids, seems like every year, Christmas time or holiday time, they get a box with a bunch of nails in it, right? And they press their face into it, and it takes the shape of their face and whatnot. The computer scanner or casting machine essentially is a lot like that, in that we place the foot on a stand, and it has all of these rods or thick nails essentially that come up underneath and take a three-dimensional cast of the foot, just like those boxes of nails. And I don't know what you call those. I should know.
But you're standing with your weight on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they can be weight bearing or semi weight bearing or non weight bearing, and it depends on the deformity of the foot, and I'll decide which way we take the image based on the person's exam.
Okay.
And so from that, then it goes into the computer, and then rather than doing the old-fashioned way and sculpting it by hand, it's myself and a mouse click, and I can click and drag and do it very quickly. And then we have a CNC machine that will carve the insert out of one big blank, and it takes about, well, the eval usually takes me about 30 minutes to make sure that the patient and I have the same understanding as far as what we need, and that I've looked at, okay, you're a pronator, or you have cable varus, or you have whatever, and okay, when I do this, I'll do that, and that will change this, and you wear a 6-inch stiletto heel on Sunday. She doesn't wear a 6-inch.
No, I don't.
But you wear certain shoes on Saturdays and different shoes on Mondays, and okay, how would I build that to accommodate the most amount of shoes that you're going to wear? And then, so that's the first 30 minutes of the appointment, and then it takes me about 30 minutes to build them, and you leave with them the same day, and that is huge if you're in pain, getting something done quickly. And so we do a ton of those, and we have a lot of fun doing them because there's more instant gratification, and because it's computerized, it's reproducible, and not only that is we warranty everything we do. So if it's not right, we fix it, and it's just part of the deal. But when you make them by hand, if it's not right, it's harder to figure out where were you before, so that you can not repeat the same mistake again. And whereas in CAD, if I go, well, we did a 9 degree here, we did 3 degrees here, and that was 4 millimeters, and she didn't like this part right here. Well, okay, it was 4 millimeters, so let's go down to 2. She didn't like 4, so we'll go down to 2 and see how that goes. So it's much more specific, and it's much more consistent, and it makes it easier for us to make the adjustments.
And those are custom built.
Oh yeah, right
You
here in
know.
Idaho.
So, so if like your arch is falling or whatever, and
Sure.
you need arch support in your shoe, I mean, you could go try to find something hanging on a peg in a store.
And you should, because if you can get something at the pharmacy for $12 that makes
Right.
everything go away, that's fantastic. But if those situations or those options don't work out, that's when a custom can really shine. And a big part of when we talk about footbeds, a big situation there is you can have, if you how do I say this? If your arch is depressed and you have funny angles in your feet, cramming something underneath your arch to try and push it back is one way to do that. It's not always the most comfortable way, but it's one way you can do it. And the off-the-shelf inserts, that's essentially what they do, is you find an insert at the Dr. Scholl's machine at Walmart
Right.
or wherever that measures your arch length, or you just go through the boxes until you find one that kind of fits. And they just push up. In the custom systems, by changing the angles of the ground underneath you, not only are we pushing up to try and support your arch or reduce certain heights, we can change the angles such that the joints actually change your arch. And the simplest way you can picture this, guys, is if you grab onto your spouse, particularly if they've been giving you a hard time, grab onto their heel and bend their heel one way out to the side, and then take their forefoot and twist it the other way. And as you twist the foot in one direction, as you twist them in the opposite directions, one way will give a higher arch, and the other way will give a lower arch, and it's all an angle. And so by changing the angles of the insert underneath you, you can actually, without even putting an arch support in, you can actually raise or lower the arch just by the angle of the ground underneath the forefoot and the heel. And that's where the custom systems really come in, because if it's just, you don't want to pay me what these cost, they're $300 a pair. You don't want to pay me for these if it's just something I'm cramming up underneath your arch. What
Right.
you want is you want something that gives you that kind of support without feeling like you're getting that kind of support. And that's where the custom systems come in, and is the angulation that we can build in will drive joint alignment, which restores function without feeling like you're standing on a ladder rung.
Would this do anything if you had plantar's warts or anything like that on the bottom of your foot?
Not so much for the wart stuff. If you had plantar fasciitis, you had foot pain. Or classically, one of the most undertreated things is people who have high arches have a ton of pain generally.
Have what?
High arches, they have a lot of pain.
Oh, okay.
And forever people thought, I have high arches, I need arch support, and you don't. The higher your arch, the more rigid your foot is, and it's not very shock absorbing. And cramming something underneath your arch pushes you into postures that are less shock absorbing through your foot, not supporting. So in those cases, we do systems where we actually change the angles and actually try and lower your arch by realigning your foot and loosening things up a little bit, so that your foot's not constantly punishing your foot and your knee through the lack of movement and rigidity that it has. You talked about pronation, and for those that don't know what pronation is, it's the rolling in. So essentially, if you look at the motion of your heel and ankle side to side, when people talk about rolling their ankle over, that's essentially their subtalar joint. So rolling your ankle over to the outside is supination, and rolling it in the opposite direction is pronation.
And you could probably tell on your shoes if the inside part of your shoes are
right. Yeah, you watch the
worn
wear.
down.
You can see the wear on your shoe. So normal, rolling in a little bit is actually really good, and it's a fantastic shock absorber when you're walking, running, kickboxing, skydiving, doing all the fun stuff that we all want to do. Too much of it will actually unlock the foot. We talk about how the heel and forefoot, as they move in directions, will unlock and make your foot very loose. And so if you overpronate or you flat foot, your foot essentially unlocks, and things become supported by soft tissue instead of the bones and the alignment. If your heel doesn't roll in, or you don't roll in, or you even roll out, that foot locks and becomes very rigid, and it doesn't deal with ground reaction forces and load, and transfers it up the chain. And so extremes on either end can be very uncomfortable, and they can drive any number of painful processes, including like the opposite hip of a given foot can make a big difference. So yeah.
Very interesting. Is any of that covered by insurance? Do you know?
This is one of the ones where Medicare falls behind, in that Medicare generally doesn't cover foot orthotics. The exceptions to that would be those diabetics who meet a list of criteria for specifically under the diabetic shoe bill. Generally, diabetic inserts are not mechanical, and so they're different. I still make them on the same system, but the goals of the device is different for diabetic management than biomechanical correction. But a lot of the private insurance is covered. Blue Cross of Idaho is fantastic, and although you can have different policies within that organization, it seems like they've covered more than not for us in the last year.
Very interesting.
Medicaid will cover for pediatrics, and then occasionally some of the other plans for adults are covered as well. So it's kind of a shoot as well as to whether it's a covered benefit or not. It's always better if it's covered. If it's
Oh
a
yeah,
benefit, for
definitely.
sure. But because we don't charge for evaluations, I've sent some people that I've looked at and said, well, you're probably not going to benefit from the posting, which is the angulation of the bed. There's probably something to Dr. Scholl's that's going to work just fine for you. And you talked about shoes. Shoe design, the proper shoe can make all the difference in the world. If you have a mild problem, wearing the right shoe is as much a key to success as anything else. And for gals, that's much harder because most women's shoes are not shaped like women's feet.
No.
And then
Especially the back part of them.
Yeah, and then on top of that, what you have is that shoe manufacturers make shoes for the masses, and if you're having foot problems, you might not be one of those, and so I've seen it more times than not. You see someone come in and say, "I bought these shoes. Everybody says they're the greatest shoes, but since I got them, I've been in pain. It's even worse than before, and these are supposed to be the best ones." And so getting shoes that have the right angulation, because a lot of shoes now have a lot of the same posts that we talk about in foot orthotics are built into the shoes. And if you roll in and you get a shoe that increases, it is designed to roll you in even more, that can be uncomfortable. Or the other way, if you need to roll in and you're not rolling in enough, and you get a shoe that stops you from rolling in, you can have problems. And so I see a number of people that come in, they go, I don't know if I need anything, but can you look? And we look at them and go, well, if you go down to, everybody has a favorite shoe store. You go down to so-and-so's and see Garth. Garth's he's gonna know exactly what you need, and he's probably got right on the shelf what you need. And I bet that fixes it, and it's the most cost effective. And if it doesn't fix that, come on back and we'll make you something.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of that.
Perfect.
We do a lot of that.
And you were talking about earlier, before we started, some of the more advanced things that are coming down. You were talking about a hand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is it, connected to the nerves in your body, or what?
The robotic type, we call a lot of I think that the internet calls it the Luke Skywalker arm, but the DECA project essentially is a prosthetic hand that is human. I mean, you can peel bananas. You can do pretty much everything that a hand can do. If you're going to play the piano again, this one would be the one that's going to do that. And then the newest versions are neural controlled. Whereas historically, what happened was if you had, say, you lost your hand just past the wrist. A lot of the muscles that run your fingers are in your forearm. And so what I would do is I would put sensors on your forearm, and you'd still move your hand. It's a ghost hand now, but your brain doesn't exactly know that your hand's gone, and you can still make the motions, and everything's hardwired. And so I would pick up the signals that your brain would send to move your hand at the forearm, and that would allow the prosthetic hand to move. And the prosthetic hands that are out right now, you have some 5-fingered systems where each finger is somewhat independent depending on the way we program it. But the newest system is neurologically controlled, which is even better than having myosensors in the forearm or the arm or having a switch, maybe you bump with your chin depending on what
Uh-huh.
level of amputation you have.
When is that going to be coming out?
That I don't know. Every time they talk about it, it seems like it's a couple more years out. But,
Very interesting.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And these are things that, with the public awareness and certainly with the unfortunate costs of the wars that we've had over the last few years have driven the development of a lot of this stuff, which we need. It'd be better if we didn't need all that stuff, but things are coming along. So yeah, so the biggest challenge is with a lot of the componentry is going to be insurance barriers. Insurances don't make money on amputees generally. I mean, particularly not with the higher end stuff. If you're, like we talked about on the break, we talked about one of the prosthetic knees has a ton of sensors on it, and it's expensive, and it went through Medicare review, and it didn't get all of the codes, the procedural codes that you would need to bill for the device to pay for it. And so because we can't give this stuff away yet,
Right.
It has to bill out for enough to cover the cost of the device, and that particular system is a $75,000 knee.
Wow.
And it didn't qualify for about $43,000 worth of reimbursement. And I love you guys out there, and I would give this stuff away if I could, but I can't give away
$43,000. Yeah.
Well, that would mean that particular knee would cost me $32,000 out of my pocket to give it to somebody, and a complete negative, and so those types of things are an issue. And then with the seeming push towards a privatization of insurances where they're profit based, insurance companies don't want to give away any money either, and so it'll be interesting to see how that goes with the technology. There's new legislature in both the House and the Senate that we're hoping will make things better, although as we all know that sometimes things that happen in D.C. don't improve things despite the best intentions. But that if they pass and go through and go into law, they would require insurance companies to not be able to discriminate against amputees for caps and policies beyond what they discriminate for other surgical procedures and medical procedures. And so that would be fantastic, because you still do run into amputees who need something. They should be covered, and the insurance company says, no, this policy, we don't cover that, or that's not a covered benefit. So things hopefully will get better and better. Yes.
Well, very interesting. Every time I talk to you, Chris, I learn something more. Just so interesting. If somebody wants to talk to you about any of this, you are located in Coeur d'Alene behind Kootenai Medical Center, correct?
Pretty much. We are on, of course, everything around Kootenai Medical Center is Ironwood.
Ironwood something.
We're on Ironwood Place, which is off of Ironwood. And we're right next to Ivy Court. So if anybody knows where Ivy Court is, we're one building before that. We have a giant sign, Adapt Prosthetics.
And you're behind the VA clinic?
And we're one block, essentially, technically, west of the VA clinic. So you can't drive, because the way the parking lots are set up, you can't actually drive from the VA clinic to our building, because they have a chain across it for parking police or whatever weirdness they have going on there. But you could walk there in about 15 seconds. And so, people can call us.
What's your number?
765-0597. We're in the phone book, and we're adaptpo.com on the web. We have Facebook. We'd love for anybody that hears us to come on the Facebook and say they heard me, and say good or bad things about what
that would
we
be great.
talked about. But evaluations are free. We like to meet people, and if we can do something that solves a problem for folks, that's what we're about. So,
well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you being here with us this afternoon. Again, this is Connie Clark with Home Helpers. We have Chris Moore with Adapt Prosthetics, and you've been listening to The Senior Moment. You have a good evening.